Hi, everybody. Thank you for still being here, I guess. And we're on to our next panel, CEO Roundtable Exploring Shared Dilemmas. And instead of me butchering everyone's bio and trying to pick through what I should pick out of the paragraphs and paragraphs, I thought I'd let everyone here introduce themselves. So we'll start with Terry.
All right, great. Thank you. I'm Terry Fitch. I'm the CEO of Good Day Farm, and I went from being the country's largest Coke dealer to getting involved in cannabis. Oh, there's a few people paying attention.
Schedule 2, right? Schedule 2?
I worked for Coca-Cola for a number of years, Coca-Cola Enterprises and McKinsey, and then got into this great cannabis business about 8 years ago in Colorado, 9 years ago. And when I was the only guy that was wearing a blue blazer at most of the conferences, now it's a completely different crowd, but had the opportunity to open facilities in Colorado, and then we now are a private multi-state operator based in Little Rock, Arkansas. We have 60 stores, 7 production facilities. We're on a run rate of close to $450 million. We will return $100 million in EBITDA, or excuse me, in equity to our shareholders. We're privately held with 5 family offices.
Not so shabby.
Yeah, tells you a little bit about us.
That one's a tough one to follow.
Lori, sorry.
That's okay. My name is Lori Holcomb. I am the founder and CEO of a company called Gold Flora. We are a vertically integrated single state operator in California. So we grow weed and we sell weed. We've got about 100,000 square feet of canopy. We have 20 retail stores we distribute throughout the state. And we've got 12 brands that would place probably in the top, right around number 10 in terms of shelf space in the state. My background, I started in the .com space. I sold love. Was one of the founding executives of a company called Matchmaker.com, which we sold back in the heyday. And then from there, started working for private equity firms, taking over distressed companies that they had invested in. Sold one to Microsoft, sold another one to ADP, sold a third one to Hewlett-Packard, and then took over a bankruptcy case in California. When I finally landed in California, I decided to stay. Got into real estate development, started a business in 2004, building homes and doing construction, and then purchased a bunch of distressed assets in around 2010 through 2014 from Fannie and Freddie Mac, and then right around 2017 purchased 28 acres to build a 620,000 square foot cannabis complex in the state in Desert Hot Springs. Right now 200,000 square feet is propped up. And then most recently, July 7th of this year, we acquired the parent company, and we are probably on a run rate to do about 200 million.
Wow. Again, great. John, you're up next.
Thank you. I'm John Levine. I am the co-founder and CEO president of Maramed Inc. Bob Fireman, my partner, was the gentleman that you saw when Frank started the show that passed away in December. Bob and I got into this business in California in 2008 with a small little grow. I come from the banking industry and manufacturing of sporting goods, as well as a family commercial real estate across the whole U.S. plus, and got into Maramed when Bob brought me a deal when he was doing a rooftop garden in California, and his guys didn't want to come home when he couldn't construct it, and they brought a presentation to him, which I flew out to California, learned how to do everything wrong in the Wild West, and brought it back to the East, where we've started again and built it up to a multi-state operator that we are today, with successful brands in many states, and continue to grow.
Great. Ed?
Thanks, Scott. Ed Schmaltz. I'm the CEO of State House Holdings. State House was formed in the spring of 2022. We put together 4 companies: Sublime, Harborside, Calyx, Urban Leaf, and Loudpack. And that's been an interesting road since then. We've got cultivation, manufacturing, brands, 13 retail stores, all in California. Like Lori and Gold Flora, we're a single state operator. My My background is that well-worn career path from Goldman Sachs to Patagonia to FAO Schwartz to cannabis. I'm probably the only person who's ever done that.
So you sold toys, and then you sold cannabis.
Kind of where I was in different stages of my life, right? So that's my story.
Usually goes the other way around.
And Darren, what did you? I mean, we had someone sold Coke, someone sold toys.
Right.
That's gonna be hard to beat.
Yeah, I've never sold either. First of all, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here today, Scott, and thanks to the Burns & Levinson team. Darren Weiss, I'm the president of Verano Holdings. Came to the industry with a legal background. I was an M&A lawyer, and it was a good time to enter cannabis about 7-8 years ago when there was pretty good deal flow. And met some guys out in Chicago who had a couple of assets at the time in the Midwest and were looking to expand. Joined the company as the lawyer and, promptly was thrown into operations, had to learn the business, all the mistakes and the ins and outs, as John said. But yeah, been with the company, since we were a group of 20 or so employees. We now have about 4,000 employees. We're vertically integrated across the country. We're currently in 13 markets, over 1 million square feet of canopy, operate 11 cultivation and manufacturing facilities, and we are continuing to grow, both in our existing markets and as we look at new markets internationally and domestically, as well as new opportunities on the ancillary side too. So great to be here and happy to share whatever wisdom or thoughts we can.
So just sort of as a softball to start us all off, so we get the harder questions. All of you came from different backgrounds in the past. None of you began your life as cultivators, as some founders are. What skill sets or experiences from your past lives, past jobs, past careers, have you brought over to being the successes that you all are, obviously? And what has maybe surprised you the most in terms of an experience, skill set that you never would have thought, but really has helped you succeed in this industry? I'll just start with Terry. We'll go down the road,
Sure.
but we won't start with Terry every time.
Okay. I'd like to, I was a passive investor the first time. And I'll tell you, when you lose a crop and someone tells you it was because it's seeded out, you said, well, what the hell is herm? Well, they actually said it was hermed, and I had no idea what they were talking about. And so I said, well, what did you mean we lost $300,000 in a crop? And the next thing you knew, I went from being a passive to an active investor and just literally put myself in a grow for a year. And almost 2 years, really trying to learn. And I kept trying to promote myself, and I kept getting demoted by everybody because there is so much to learn. Sure. I have a financial background. I ran bottling businesses all over the country. We consolidated 80% of them in the U.S., so it's kind of what's happening in this industry is, and eventually, what happened in the bottling industry will happen the same in this industry. But it just, you had to learn it from the ground up. I mean, it is a very unusual business. There's just so many different things. You have this marriage of tribal knowledge and CEO or Fortune 50 processes that you kind of marry together in a unique outcome. So, I mean, we focused on yields and costs and track, rank, and publish everything. And that enables us to operate like we do and return what we have to return to our shareholders. It's important to us. At the same time, we're building brands. Mm-hmm. And, I know there's a lot of talk about national brands. I mean, I spent years at Coca-Cola. It's hard for me to say that a national brand. I mean, there's Wana, clearly, and you got Cookies, maybe. You got some interesting things out there, but it's difficult to have that kind of presence, especially with Coca-Cola. They would spend $50 million on an introduction of a brand. So we're nowhere near that yet because we're in the infancy stages. But I think the financial acronym really is helping the industry now. But the access to data, whether that's the new suite or whoever Dutchy a lot of people are using, and the transition to data will help us be more effective and efficient in our decision making, and being able to manage this business like any other business. It's about managing your cost, understanding your top line, and building a team. And we didn't have the opportunity to plant flags. We are very focused internally in the states we're in, And you heard it from the stage from other people. We're reinvesting in the states we're in. So that's critically important, but you've got to really understand who you are.
Laurie, you've been an entrepreneur in real estate and matchmaker.com. What skill sets have you brought over? And what surprised you the most of what you needed from your past?
Yeah, well, I'd say in California specifically, real estate. So you really need to understand real estate, location of where you're going to get your license, how you're going to tie up the real estate. Real estate is key in probably every market, but specifically California. So understanding how to work with landlords, having a good presentation, you sort of have a one-up. I also remember when we won our first license in Long Beach. It was a lottery system.
Okay.
So they literally, they drew a ping pong ball. They're like, you're number 12, you win. And I'm like, we're gonna be millionaires. Yeah, that was a long time ago. But we have a great, in terms of our real estate and construction financing, we had to build this property back in, 2017, and back then, and the lender was here today, so the person who actually gave us the first loan, we had to put a personal guarantee down. So, that becomes pretty serious when you got a PG on a construction for a cannabis building that you've never done before. So yes, real estate would be it, and then the restructuring of companies. Just recently, like I said, closed on the transaction with the parent company, and we announced that we cut $30 million in savings in the first 7 weeks.
Wow.
They anticipated we would do 20 throughout the end of the year. So we really accelerated that, and just restructuring side to get to the very basics of running a business, which is what Terry was talking about.
I mean, that seems like a common theme throughout this entire conference, that cannabis isn't so special. It's other than the illegality, but it's a business, it needs to be run like a business, and all you all want to have is be treated like any other business. So anyways, I'll stop on my soapbox. John?
Well, you went right into my line.
I know, but go ahead, you could steal it.
Well, I mean, being back in 2008, getting into this industry, Terry said it. Bob and I showed up wearing suits and ties at a show. Everybody's walking around in flip-flops, tie-dye shirts, and shorts, smoking a joint. So the times have really changed. You go to those shows today, everybody's dressed up in proper attire, talking more professional. What did I bring to this industry? A lot of real estate knowledge.
Yes.
I was in construction, I was in real estate negotiation, but I also had manufacturing experience in the sporting good industry, so I also brought that plus finance. So when we got into this business, I went out, and the very first property that I bought in this industry happened to be a post office from the federal government. I turned the post office distribution center into the Thomas C. Slater Center in Providence, Rhode Island, with my first build of a seed-to-sale operation in New England. It was the very first facility here. Learned quite a bit about growing in California, but also learned about how to build this all in a way that you could expand it and grow in different fashions. This industry was crazy with different types of rules. Rhode Island, you had only the right to 99 plants at any time. 99 plants, those weren't plants. Those were trees. When we went and did a harvest, we weren't just taking a bunch of clippers and clipping the plants down like we do today. We were actually taking sawzalls and chainsaws to cut down these trees. And we couldn't hang them upside down. We had to trim them and get off the limbs so that we could hang the limbs, because those were tree trunks that we were taking down. When you have to grow 100 plants and you have to grow to produce the most amount of medicine, you learn how to do it in very different ways. So I've learned how to grow from the large, the small, the Duda method, the pineapple method, the flood and drain. I knew nothing about growing, by the way.
Well, apparently you've learned a lot, so.
Yeah, well, I've been in for too long now.
Oh, that's
But the biggest things that I think I brought were knowledge of how to negotiate the proper real estate deals, being able to talk to a banker and get borrowing. I mean, we got our first mortgage when no one was borrowing money in the industry. We got it from a bank called Bank of New England. I think some of us have heard of the old Bank of New England that went under. But there's another bank here in Massachusetts, actually New Hampshire, that took the name and lent money to the first cannabis deal in our two deals, one in Delaware and one in Rhode Island. And that got me my first mortgage, realizing that banking wasn't not allowed, it was real. So you had to understand how to talk. So my banking experience and background. The last thing I brought was financial know-how. We ran this as a regular business. I actually set up these businesses with proper GLs, bank accounts, checking accounts, AP, AR, and we issued 1099s. Do you ever see a grower that grows in his backyard when he gets a 1099? He doesn't know what to do with it. And the first time I ever had the FBI come knocking at my door was actually a good one. They weren't coming to bust me, they were looking for information on somebody that did something wrong. And they said, do you have any records that you could give us? I said, what would you like? They said, well, we'd like to know what they bought. Did you give them any records? I handed them copies of checks. I handed them 1099s. I handed them payables, invoices. And they looked at me and they said, what is all this? I said, it's what you asked for. It's paperwork on a business. They said, we've never seen this before. We've done this in California for 10 years. I said, well, if you ask me in California, I can give you the same thing. They were just happy to see somebody running it like a real business. And that's what this is. It's a real business. And that's why we're all sitting up here as we're successful, because we all did the same thing. Ran this as a real industry.
So Ed, you come from consumer product goods, and for quite some time, that was sort of the mantra, bring people over consumer product goods sector, the economy, in leadership roles. How has that background helped you in your roles, both at Calyx Peak and now at State House, or Urban and then State House?
Sure. Well, fundamentally, I agree with my esteemed colleagues here. But in answer to your question, Scott, I think, consumer products companies are fundamentally about brands, right? And, what did I bring over? I guess it's leadership experience and communication. I mean, these are small companies, right? I don't think any of us are sitting in an office reading reports all day and pontificating like a Fortune 50 CEO would be. You got to wear multiple hats, frankly, even during the day. It's a constant strain. And I'm not a micromanager by any stretch, but I know what's going on across the company, and I know where to poke my nose and where to let the team execute. But I think communication is so important. Cannabis is a lot like the outdoor business when I was at Patagonia. And there's a sense of authenticity. What do you stand for as a company? And cannabis culture is very strong. And we talk a lot about it at State House, particularly with the bud tenders, the people making an hourly wage at the retail store, talking to customers. Cannabis culture is so important. I don't want to say they don't think about multiples and cash flow and those kind of things, but they kind of don't. That's not their worldview. They think about cannabis, the power of the plant, they're passionate about it, and they communicate that to customers. So I think as the CEO of a cannabis company today, particularly in California, you need to be able to talk to investors and board members about data and strategic imperatives. And then you also need to be able to sit down and share your favorite strain and discuss cannabis culture and why that's important, that a company our size needs to hold on to that. That really resonates with the bud tenders. And I think it prevents, as we get bigger, we got to hold on to that heritage. Otherwise, you kind of get hollowed out and you just become a corporation that doesn't really stand for anything. In cannabis, I think you really have to stand for something. Your brands have to stand for something, and your employees appreciate that.
So Darren, you're the lawyer's dream. You started as a lawyer and you escaped the billable hour. What from your legal background has served you really well, in your role now as president? And I know you used to be GC and moved up, but you're more than just a general counsel now. Obviously.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I would categorize the skills in two different ways. The first, being able to understand laws and regulations, as John said, every state is so different. The nuance with respect to what can and can't be done, knowing, where you can push the envelope and where you've got black lines is super important. It's also important not only from an operational perspective, but also from a transaction perspective. Where does it make sense, for my business to expand? How does my business model translate into a state with unlimited licenses versus limited licenses versus segregated licenses, vertically integrated licenses? Having a real handle on not only the regulatory and license structure, but also the implications of that structure as it relates to the way that you operate the business and grow is incredibly important. And having a good legal team even though no one really likes to pay for lawyers, sorry,
I've heard from all of you on this damn panel.
it's
from John.
important. Yeah. And then, secondly, I would say being a good M&A attorney really requires you to be able to focus both on the forest and the trees. And that is so important in this business. As Ed said, being able to understand at a really granular level what is driving consumer behavior, what is driving various business decisions. For me personally, before I went into law, I did some business consulting around performance management. So I've been just extremely maniacally focused on KPIs and KPI development, efficiency. As I mentioned, we went from a couple of states to 13 states, with close to $1 billion run rate, one of the most profitable businesses in the space, free cash flowing in the space as well. And to do that, you have to really be focused not only on the big picture, but on the bottom line, and on being efficient at every level of the organization. In terms of how you create products, in terms of how you develop processes, in terms of how you deploy equipment and resources. And so that's been a driving force behind everything I've done at Verano, and I think we've done a pretty good job at it.
So a couple of you mentioned brands, and so Terry, you did, and certainly Ed. I guess my question is, I know we had a branding panel earlier, but I'd like to get your perspective. Can there ever be a national brand, as long as cannabis is, let's just say, Schedule something or another? And what would it take? Because I think Terry, you mentioned like maybe there's Wana, maybe cookies, but that's kind of it. But yet you're focusing, I think all of you are focusing on brands. So I don't know who wants to start, but I'm just curious, could there be a national brand?
Yeah, I'll start. From a branding perspective, we don't even call our person a marketing officer, we call them branding in retail, because I think it's important that to separate yourself from the sea of sameness, you've got to have brands, and you've got to have quality brands, whether they're national or regional. I think it's really, as you're becoming more and more vertically integrated, it's really understanding your brand, your audit, your brand identity, and who you are. It's in our name. We and don't overpromise and underdeliver. We are in an industry that gets to make people's lives incrementally better. That's an incredible opportunity. Before, I was in an industry that made people fat. So I'm in an industry now that gets... So you get an opportunity to really make their lives incremental and solve a solution. So we look at it as in our name. That's why we chose our name the way we did with Good Day, Good People, and Good Cannabis is kind of our mantra. So I think brands matter, whether it's national, who really care. As long as the brands make sense and having the right mixture of the brands that you're growing and the third-party brands that that present themselves to you. People are doing a good job in different branding areas, and you've got to take advantage of that. And the consumer, you've got to understand the consumer and what they want. And most cannabis people like trial. They don't like to just stay with one. That's why we have so many strains, a proliferation of all these strains, and we do all this pheno hunting, and we buy all these unique opportunities and from a strain standpoint, and not even talking about the different extraction processes. So, I think brands matter, and as you want to deliver quality and separate yourself from the sea of sameness in the business, you've got to have brands that make sense both on a local or vertically integrated and national basis or regional basis, however you want to define that.
Brands are definitely the future of this industry.
Yeah.
Okay.
And brands are going to be everywhere. But as everybody spoke about earlier, the biggest issue is state to state, there's different requirements and different rules. You can't buy all the equipment and put it in one state and manufacture it. You have to buy the same equipment, put it in every state. It's a very expensive process depending on what you're making. However, as Terry was saying, you have to make a quality product. Our Betty's Eddies, we'd be embarrassed if we just let anybody make them.
Well, I actually have something, because I actually use your bedtime Betty's, but my dispensary around the corner stopped carrying them. So what's going on there?
Well, they probably are just not paying the bills on time because it's an industry that's very tight right now. So yes, I'll give you some other locations that are around you.
Well,
But if you got your medical card, we can deliver it right to your house.
Dispensary around the corner, so I got some.
But it's very important that, when you make a quality product, I mean, Terry worked for Coke, but we want to be the Coca-Cola that when somebody gets a Betty's Eddies, you're getting that same quality, same taste, same effect every single time. When we got into this industry, it was purely medical, where we did precision dose. So we were very cautious about everything that we did to make sure you got the consistency. But if you bought a 5 milligram and you cut it in half, you were getting 2.5. And that's the type of consistency that's missing from a lot of the industry of people that just come in, create an edible. I mean, gummies in California when I first got there, no offense to the California people, but back when I was there, it was really the Wild West. You could go in, it will say 5 milligrams, but it could be 10 milligrams, and you could eat it all at one time if you took just one bite, and you weren't expecting to get that effect. It's a real shocker. So having good brands with consistency and the ability to sell them with the confidence that the customer is going to get the same experience is very important. And I think that's where being a brand over the whole nation is going to be very difficult because of state-to-state regulations. I do feel that even with descheduling, it will be a while before we get the ability to ship across state lines.
And so Laurie and I'll go to you, Laurie and Ed being SSOs or single state operators, do you have different difficulties? I mean, obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, are you trying to create national brands or just a brand that is distinguished in California?
Well, so I look at it very different. So if we wanted to be in Florida, I have like 2 or 3 options, right? I'd have to go to Trulieve or someone who's got the retail footprint. You want to go to Chicago, you've got certain MSOs. So for right now, I've been on panels with Ed, and I think he and I have the exact same, along with probably everyone up here. First-party brands through our own stores is what drives our margin. Because we have such a heavy penalty in taxes, we've got to drive that first-party product, which means I don't have to collect, right? We talk about people paying us. If I'm pushing 30% of my own product through my own store, now, to Terry's point, I've got my own gummies, I've got my own this, my own that. It is almost impossible right now, if we're all being honest, to build a national brand because Trulieve's not going to carry my product, and I'm not going to carry her product. And it's not because I don't want to, and I'm just using an example. Kim has a lot of stores in Florida. And then you start seeing that separation in Illinois, in Michigan, right? And some brands like Cookies, they've been able to go, but Cookies is not going to have the same flour in California because they have someone else that grows for them. That flour doesn't translate to that grow in Florida. So I think right now brands will be important. We're just a long ways off.
Did you want to comment?
Yes.
Yes.
What
okay.
she said, yeah.
Darren, did you want to comment?
Well, I was just going to speak to, and I think Terry spoke to this a little bit about, I think the focus on national brands in some ways misses the point. The cannabis consumer, we like to think about the cannabis consumer as being, someone who's incredibly passionate, but also a little bit fickle. Cannabis consumers want authenticity. And I think a focus on authenticity and quality and building a brand around those two pieces is more important than creating something national for the sake of creating something national, because you don't get the benefits of economies of scale that you do in traditional CPG. And so understanding, as Terry said, who you are and who you want to be and what it is that you want to express through your brands and products, to me is far more important than creating something that happens to check every box in every market. When I talk about the cannabis consumer being passionate and fickle, one of the sort of implications of that is that there's a strong desire for a local connection or a regional connection. Folks want, if they're in West Virginia, we have operations in West Virginia, folks want a product or a brand that speaks to their mountain roots. You don't necessarily see that in Coca-Cola or Pepsi. So I think that's important. That authenticity is super important. It's something that I know MSOs struggle with for sure, and a focus of ours as we really aim to be able to meet consumers where they are and be authentic in what we do.
So the industry's had some good-ish news at the federal level, right? So the safer banking bill or whatever it's called this week got out of committee. and then potential recommendation about rescheduling. Let's just start with SAFER. Does this do anything, in your opinion, given there's like 10 banks in this audience or something like that, 10 banks or financial institutions who are providing either banking services or credit to the industry? I mean, seriously, like, does it make that big of a difference to your industry?
First of all, thank you for not starting off with what are the chances that SAFE gets passed. Appreciate
Does
that.
it matter? I mean, clearly the question is,
Yeah.
does it matter?
Yeah. To me, the answer is yes, it absolutely matters, but not necessarily because it changes the way that we do business.
Okay.
It matters because I believe very strongly that we live in a world in which momentum plays an incredibly important role. I was talking to my lobbyist this morning who told me that oftentimes reform is like a constipated stomach. And nothing comes for a while, and this is particularly apt for Congress, right? And then eventually, you know, it all comes pretty quickly. And I thought that was sort of an apt analogy, but that momentum is so important. Having a national conversation about cannabis, having our legislators take time to think about the issue, to think of the way that this product impacts people's lives, that this industry impacts the hundreds of thousands of folks who are employed and who are developing careers in the space. That in and of itself is incredibly meaningful. To the extent it opens up opportunities for small businesses to borrow money, to have easier access to financial institutions. It's not the big companies that have the problems, it's the small guys.
Sure.
That is super meaningful, and that's incredibly important. I don't think it happens like that when SAFER passes, but it's important momentum. So in my mind, it matters. It doesn't matter, though, in the way I think that everyone thinks it may.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyone else on the panel?
I would add something. From the consumer perspective, no one's going to wake up, SAFER passed, let's go dab.
Right.
They're not going
Right.
to do that. It really isn't going to change.
Well, I might, but that's
you
the
might,
difference.
okay. Scott Moskol will take note. Come to California when you do that, please. It's not going to change, other than maybe credit cards will affect the consumer.
Do you think that will open the door for credit cards?
I don't prognosticate anymore on cannabis legislation. Yeah,
No. It's like lasso in
It's a
jello.
step in the right direction.
Yeah,
but
for
There's
sure.
no guarantees.
for sure.
What about rescheduling? Other than 280E going away for you all, what does rescheduling really do? I mean, granted, 280E going away is a huge, bonus. I don't want to try to minimize it, but what else does rescheduling bring to your companies, other than more money?
Well, it's better cash flow, but it brings a new sense in the environment of people sitting there saying it's still federally legal, but it's a limited federally legal. It's not that same stigma of that you're a real bad drug. It will make people feel more comfortable. I think it will have people discussing not just credit card, but uplistings, and there's no guarantee of that either.
Sure.
Because unless somebody really takes the step to say, hey, we're going to be the first to try this, and that's going to be a difficult task to get somebody to do. But there are drug companies that have Schedule 3 and 4 that are on the big board, so it is possible, but it's just not a given. But I do feel that just shows that the government is looking at this, that it's not a bad drug anymore, which will give more people comfort level in terms of the consumers wanting to partake.
Anyone else with a different viewpoint?
I don't necessarily have a different viewpoint, but I think it's also important not to overlook the opportunity that a rescheduling has on the development of the science around cannabis in the United States. Much of the impasse, not all of it for sure, but much of the impasse as it relates to scheduling versus descheduling revolves around disagreement on the availability and the trustworthiness of some of the science. I don't think any of us would disagree about it, but at certain levels of government. And to the extent that that scientific research can be advanced, to the extent that we can create and go through drug development processes and conduct R&D and create a literature, that is peer-reviewed, double-blind, et cetera, supporting what I think we all know to be the power of the plant, it absolutely advances the ball. It's not overnight. It's not, rescheduling does not mean that descheduling is around the corner. But there's no doubt in my mind that it gets us closer. I view this as really a long arc. A lot of us are battle weary. We've been in this space, what seems like a long time. But ultimately, this is still the very beginning. It's maybe the end of the beginning, but it's still the beginning. And so understanding that, having patience and perspective is important, and I think rescheduling helps us move along that arc for sure.
Yeah, and let's not forget, it's probably a year before rescheduling if you follow the kind of them.
Well, that was
Yep.
my next question. I mean, you all have probably the same lobbyists or employ some of the same lobbyists of government affairs. What are you hearing? Will it happen before the election of 2024? I know, Ed, you don't prognosticate, so you're off.
I'm
the hook.
listening.
Yeah. Well, all of this is like lasso and jello. I mean, it's all over the place. So, we've all been gun shy. I mean, if you follow the typical recommendation, it's usually an annual year. So let's assume from the start of that recommendation, it's another year if it follows the typical, right? But I don't think I can only speak for myself. I've given up trying to figure out cannabis legislation or rescheduling for some time.
I mean, if you look at SAFE, taking a guess is really just kind of stupid. So
Trust me.
it's very
That's why I didn't
difficult.
ask you if this Congress is ever going to do anything besides elect a House Speaker one day.
But, I think we were talking about this last night at dinner. There's so much debt out there amongst the public companies that at some point something's got to give.
Right.
So to sustain a debt load in the mid-teens and a couple points origination, a couple points exit, with the taxes that we're under, it's almost like having two hands tied behind your back. We're treated very poorly as an industry. We all accept that. We all run vertically integrated companies. And something's got to give where more money and equity come into the marketplace. It's okay to have debt, but those debt loads, they're not normal. So no other business could sustain that.
So let's turn a little bit to markets and California and New York in particular. Yes, Ed, you're going to have to answer this. I'm sorry. But California and New York, two of the most populous states. I think many people thought that once either or both went adult use, right, it was going to be a huge economic windfall for cannabis companies, but yet it seems not to have been. And yes, I guess the story about New York is still to be written a lot, but what's Ed and Lori, what's your assessment of the California market? Is it all this hype that California is a horrible market to be in? Is that true? Is it more sort of like urban legend? And is it all just because of this illicit market, or what do you guys see? You guys are California only based. And then if the rest of you want to opine, feel free.
Yeah, I would say, and feel free to chime in, Lori, California's a great market. It's a huge market, 40 million people. There's still a lot of room for expansion. 60% of municipalities don't allow cannabis retail. Deep cannabis culture there, right? The Emerald Triangle. A lot of the great strains have come out of California. So much sort of legitimacy. I do think the great brands will come out of California, and once the walls come down, I think California, some companies in California will be the kingmaker because of that authenticity and that great heritage. Is it hard? Hell yeah, it's really freaking hard. A lot of competition, and I'll just say that. Everyone gets taxed, and the regulators are doing the best they can, and okay, you can fight that and try to tinker with it on the edges. But really, we've got to compete with the illicit market. We have to lower costs. We have to have a safer, better, more consistent quality product. And we have to beat the illicit market out of the thing. We can't just say, oh, law enforcement isn't doing anything and throw up our hands. That's our job, is to beat the illicit market by coming up with innovative product, constantly reminding customers of the health hazards of stuff that's been sprayed with DDT and these horrible chemicals that they spray on this stuff because they don't care because it's not tested. So I think that's very much a roll up your sleeves, really rugged, fiercely competitive product. But as Frank Sinatra said, if you can make it there, I think long term you can probably make it anywhere because it's coming for you guys, right? All the limited license states will be more competitive. And I think California companies that survive are going to be in a pretty good position to be competitive nationally.
And Lori, what do you think?
Yeah.
As a survivor yourself.
Yeah, so I agree with that. There's a lot of not just cultivation licenses that are falling off, but a lot of distressed M&A opportunities. So for me or Ed to be able to get to, I don't know what Ed's goal is, we would like to increase our retail footprint. For us to get to 50 stores would not be the same. I think Jason was up here from TerraSen. There was a state that, hey, it's unlimited, you go do 150. For me, that's going to be irreplaceable because it's so difficult to have vertical integration in California. It's taken me 7 years to get where we're at. If we keep going and we can get to 30, 40, 50 dispensaries, no one can come and replicate that. So we're building a brand position for the long haul. I also see some groups that came out really early, and that probably didn't benefit them. They spent a lot of cash, and I think sort of slow and steady wins the race. And we're constantly maturing as a market. So yeah, I love California. It's a big market for us.
My hat's off to them because it's uninvestable for us. I mean, it's just what we look at. It's very difficult, and the fact that they're actually doing as well as they are, in that we like the rule of law, we like red states, and those don't exist in California. And
It's certainly not a red state.
it's certainly not a rule of law either. So, it's just not enforced. And I don't know how, they wake up every day dealing with the illicit market the way they do, because it's no secret where it is and where the genesis of it is. There's just no rule of law to enforce it. And until that's done, it'll be a challenge in, just build a moat around there, because a lot of companies are looking at you guys going, how did they do that? Because the business is difficult enough in other areas with the taxation on top of it, and the excise and the special taxes. It makes it a challenge.
What about New York? I mean, I think, Darren, you guys are in New York, right? If I'm not.
We're not. We had signed a deal to enter New York and ended up terminating the deal. Yeah.
So what's wrong with New York? I mean,
How much time do you have?
Well, I know we don't have enough time, but and Ed, you just said about California, the regulators are doing the best they can, or something to that effect. I guess I would wonder if folks who have looked at New York would say the same thing about New York, or want to say anything about New York.
Well, I mean,
silence is golden, I suppose.
yeah, California is in much better. New York is tough. I mean, when you walk into every bodega and see illegal product from all over the country,
California.
It makes it. It's all California product that's in New York, and for those of us who walk, and I'm sure you guys did the same thing. You literally immerse yourself in the market for a week or two, and you go, they've lost control, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, the state's definitely, sorry.
Oh, I would just say, I look at California, we're through our regulatory, right? We started in 2018. New York is just starting. So the comment I just made about the people who started really early in California, they spent too much money too soon to get to a market that wasn't stabilized. So now New York is right where we were in 2018. And I think, I don't want to speak for everybody here, we're just waiting to see what happens. And I think we're going to be waiting for a few years.
Well, you're just waiting to see what the regulations will be one day.
Yes.
When New York's hindering the ability for legalization to be open properly, and they have more illegal stores opening. I mean, stores, not just sale of product on the street. I mean, they're letting stores open left and right, and they're not shutting them quick enough. It's very impossible to go in and build a cultivation, processing, and retail program and survive there when you're fighting the illicit market.
Yeah, I think the big difference is that New York, California is, the issues that California has in many ways are related to the development of that program absent regulation, and the state has attempted to essentially put a regulatory sheen on the state of the industry, and they've made a lot of progress in doing so. New York is an unforced error. I mean, they had the opportunity to create something meaningful, and instead of following best practices and looking at other states, they wanted to, they tried to satisfy objectives, many of which are very laudable, but they did it in a way that, and are doing it in a way that makes no sense from a business perspective, which is so unfortunate.
John, or Terry was saying.
I was just going to make the comment that, just to create a store and give someone a store because of social justice and expect them to understand how to run that, I mean, you teach, we got to back up and really understand what we're trying to do or what New York's trying to do. But I just find it incredible. I agree with you. They had every opportunity to take learnings, and they completely went the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So, John, did you? I'm sorry.
I was just going to add, I had started in California back a long time ago, but when they redid the whole program in San Jose where we had our retail store, there were 126 retail stores in San Jose when we were there.
126?
They cut down to 6. We were the final 6. And I lost my license because our building had a squatter. And squatters' rights were more important than the rights of us. So we walked away from the license in California. But California, I mean, it's a very difficult market. Like they were saying, you had to be there, you had to be strong, you had to be patient. But that's a great market, but it's a very difficult market. Massachusetts is no much better right now because they're issuing over and over more and more licenses. There's no cap. This is becoming a very oversaturated area in certain cities and towns that are putting the force on these people to have it worse than any other state. And I think that's a big problem, not like California.
Are we going to say something, or can I jump to next? All right, next question, which is a good segue. We keep talking about the illicit or legacy market. Is it just in New York and California that have the severe problems? I assume it's all over in every state. And I guess my question really is, what can you do about it, right? I mean, is there anything you can do? And I don't mean like just pay more money to the local police to go and round them up, but systemically, or like, is there something that the cannabis industry, all of us should do to combine our forces to sort of push out what's been a huge destroyer of the industry?
Well, I think John said it earlier. He literally, the answer to the test is educating people what they're consuming. Because the illicit market is going to be there. It's going to be there for a long time, and that's going to take time. And the only way that we see, because we operate in states where it's prevalent, like Louisiana, it's prevalent in Arkansas, prevalent still in Missouri and Mississippi. And we look at our pricing and our price elasticity of our lower end brands to make sure we compete with it. But it is there, and it's going to stay prevalent. But unless we come out with a unified approach to they're really consuming product that is really bad for you with really bad pesticides on it, then it will probably be a while before that, because law enforcement has proved they're not going to do much of anything, at least in the states we're in. But they do, any of the big grows. I mean, obviously most of the product is coming from, the California market.
But how do you get that message out to the public? I mean, all of us here know that, right? But your average person going in to buy a pre-roll or, package of whatever, Betty Eddies or whatever, how do you get the message to them? I mean, it's really the consumer who's driving the illicit market in many ways, and what's driving them is pricing. And certainly with inflation in the last year and a half, I mean, pricing matters. But how do you get that message? Hey, we're tested every day.
Yeah, I think that the looking at it solely from an educational perspective, I don't think works. Education is 100% necessary, but frankly, we have all the education that there is on cigarettes, on fatty and salty foods. People still eat them and buy them. One of the biggest things that I think gets missed and was alluded to is around pricing, and in particular the taxation structure. Our headquarters is in Illinois, in the Illinois market. In some cases, people are paying a 50% tax rate after you add the state tax and the local tax and all these different items. And you can have all the education in the world. There's going to be a certain segment of the population that just is not going to buy a product through the dispensary ecosystem because they can't afford it. And until you can create that tax parity, a pricing parity that makes sense to the consumer, keyed, of course, and tied, of course, to that educational element, you're not going to be able to really make a dent, in my view. And the other piece is around innovation as it relates to product forms. As the industry matures, as all of us have an opportunity to develop and create new categories in terms of CPG products that we produce, it's going to be harder for the black market to catch up. They will invariably catch up, and we've got to keep innovating. And it's going to be, for some time, us chasing our tail, so to speak.
So it's retail in a way, like you just have to keep coming up with something new on the shelves for your consumer to keep coming back in? Is that simple as that?
It's all those things, right?
Yeah.
It's law enforcement, it's innovation, it's public service messages. A guy I know spoke to a drug dealer in Las Vegas, and there the drug dealer said, "Oh, we don't deal with weed anymore. We can't make money." So these are fiercely economic animals, right? So if we can drive down the competitiveness of the legal cannabis market, I think we'll be successful. Law enforcement definitely has a place to play. Here's a true story. August 8th, 2020, law enforcement next to one of our stores shut down 7 illicit stores. August 9th, our store sales doubled and held that way for 16 months before they opened back up and a couple legal stores opened up.
It took them as long as 16 months.
So we had a 16-month run of what an enforced market would look like, and literally our sales doubled overnight in a store. Imagine if that happened across California. It would be pretty great. But it can't just be law enforcement.
But we've also had some markets that we're in that the illicit market, you talk about brands, and what they're finding is these police are getting raids of these places. At a local laundromat, they raided a place. 90% of the product was our products. They were buying our product at our store, taking it and reselling it, taking advantage of the medical discount and being able to put it back out there.
Like an arbitrage play, so
But it's all about pricing.
Entrepreneurs.
Well, it's in a state where there's no tax on cannabis.
Yeah.
So
it's a huge difference. I mean, as you were saying, taxation in Illinois is so outrageous, like California. You could buy it on the illicit market for much cheaper without the tax, but you're taking the bigger risk.
And the diversion of product, that's not helping. So as Ed knows, you can go into any bodega in New York City and find a majority of the California cannabis brands, and they're not necessarily tested, right? They're not necessarily made in proper locations, but the consumer now is not paying as much taxes on that, so now they have access to packaged product, CPG, that looks the same, that costs less money. And there's no real enforcement on that right now.
And that's not even speaking about Delta 8 or Delta 9.
Right.
Yeah.
Products that are out there that are causing our gummies and.
Well, what do you guys think? I mean, that's an interesting question. I was talking to some folks at Benzinga about this, but what do you think about the Delta 8 market? I mean, in Delta 9, the synthetic, psychoactive, hemp-derived products.
All the brands and the big brands, Steezy has a CBD website, Cookies has a website, and they are not limited on their marketing. So they're able to take their brand, put CBD behind it for Delta 8 or Delta 9, and then market it out on the regular channels that we can't because we're THC.
But Delta 8 and Delta 9 are completely different than CBD that you can buy for.
Oh, absolutely.
No, 100%.
So are any of you guys looking into this? And do you see it as a threat, or do you see it as a component?
It's absolutely a threat. If you're measuring your business, you can see that it's a threat. And the synthetics is just, in my opinion, just a disaster. I don't know how anybody in their right mind will allow synthetics on the market. But Delta 9, is a little more challenging, and we're considering getting into the if we can't beat them, join them conversation on, because the Farm Bill's not going to go away. So until they have a ruling favorably, we're considering taking our strength in the markets that we have strength and just eliminating it, make the barrier of entry so high that these stores don't want to carry it under the risk of making high quality products. So we'll see, but it is a, they don't have any of the taxation that we have, and they're in this.
Don't you see it as a way to build your brand?
Absolutely.
Because you don't have the restrictions.
Right?
This is correct.
Yeah, and like I said, it's we fought against it in Arkansas, and we had to switch teams in Louisiana because if you're in Bourbon Street, you can walk and find in every bodega you see Delta 8 and Delta 9 gummies in every single T-shirt shop in the market.
What about the rest of you? How are you looking at, is it a threat, is it a component of your business plan? Is it who the heck knows, or is it I don't want to tell you?
We're looking at it.
Darren? You could say I don't want to tell you.
No, listen, I think it's absolutely a threat to the business. Frankly, it scares me a little bit, the lack of oversight, the lack of regulation and testing. We are just waiting, in my mind, for the other shoe to drop. There's going to be someone who's going to get sick, unfortunately. And as it relates to the public opinion around this, we're going to be lumped in, with whatever that impact is. So it is scary to me, for sure. It is not part of our business plan at this point in time.
So, John, did you want to say something? All right, so just switching quickly, because we have about 3.5 minutes. MasterCard over the last few months has been shutting down PIN debit. Has that impacted your retail operations? What are you doing as like backups? Are there any new sort of payment platforms out there that you're looking at, such as some of our clients, KindTap, which yes, I had to say. No, but seriously, I mean, KindTap is a compliant way for folks to use credit and pay, and with MasterCard and Visa saying you ain't going to use our rails, how do you look at this?
It's a total shit show. It's like Republicans trying to elect a speaker. It is just awful because it is so disruptive to our business. Consumers want to come in and use a debit card, even better, a credit card, and that's a struggle. I mean, they're using fintech to behind the scenes buy crypto and sell crypto, open up a savings account, close a savings account. I mean this is money laundering at some fundamental level. So
in the bank I was at a conference last week, and the bank regulators said it's infinitely easier to bank cannabis than it is crypto. So crypto I think it's not the panacea, but.
So yeah, super frustrating. We're looking at, we were motoring along with 2Accept. That blew up last week with Visa. We've got a number of other options. It is very, very frustrating because, I can deal with regulations on my cultivation, on your manufacturing processes, but when something hurts my ability to service my customer the way he or she wants to be serviced, that is, it is, come on. It's just not okay. So we have a role to play. We need to figure this out. I know there's a lot of companies circling and some making claims that may or may not be true, but it's really quickly finding who's legit and can operate, and I think KindTap is one of them, and who is not, and focusing on those that work.
How about the rest of you? Was it a huge issue, or had you alternative plans in place?
Well, I went to some of my friends, and there is a group that's going out that's going to bring suit against MasterCard.
Yes.
Because this is illegal what they're doing, trying to tell a person where they can and can't use their money. An ATM is not a credit card. It is an ATM card, even though it does say MasterCard or Visa on it, and an individual has the right to use it to buy what they choose. And this isn't going to be something that's over very easily. I do believe that this is going to be looked at, and it's going to be probably overturned. Yeah, I would agree. It has not had a major impact on our business. We've deployed PIN debit solutions across most of our 130 plus retail footprint, store retail footprint, and have not, as of yet, had serious disruptions. But the equities of the issue are just disgusting, frankly.
Well, we have 17 seconds apparently. So does anyone have a quick question? Or if not, one question right there, sir.
Yeah, great panel. It's really been interesting. I appreciate that. Talking about rescheduling, and it looks like indication Schedule 3. Darren, I really love your insight about how that could impact cannabis as a plant and have more science. But how are you guys seeing this impacting state operators and the rec market?
Yeah. The answer is not much. From what I'm hearing, what I believe will be the result of this, assuming that Schedule 3 is the way that the DEA decides to take this, is that you're going to see a dual path. You'll see what I'll call the pharmaceutical path, so drug development, pharmaceutical manufacturing, et cetera, and you're going to see the persistence of existing markets protected by an updated memorandum for the Department of Justice. Word on the street is that Merrick Garland has maybe even already drafted that memorandum, and that the release is being timed for political effect. And so that's what I think you'll see. I think we'll have an opportunity to get a little more comfort in the post Sessions era around existing programs, both medical and adult use, but an opportunity for drug development. There's also obviously a movement around states' rights. I know David Joyce is releasing an updated version of the States Act, and there's some real support for that. Again, not prognosticating on the passage of legislation at this point in time, but I don't think it's going to have a meaningful impact. I don't think it means interstate commerce. I don't think it means necessarily uplisting access to U.S. exchanges. I don't think it necessarily, in the absence of SAFE, means immediate access to traditional debt financing either. I think it's in many ways a status quo, save and except the incredibly important issue of tax reform.
So with that, I want to thank our panel. We probably could have talked another 5 hours, but we have another panel right after this. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.